G'day and welcome to the Game Day Squad NRL Fantasy Show. I'm Stu, that's Dill, and we're the Fantasy Bros. We're back again, partnering with Game Day Squad to bring you all you need to know to succeed in GDS Rugby League this season. It's Wednesday, you know what that means. TLT has dropped and it's time to take a deep dive into our round 23 GDS squads for Indigenous round. With 5 rounds to go, there is plenty to play for with the leaderboards and the prize cards still far from finalised. And we're also down to the final 4 in the Classic Cup. Dill, you were recently eliminated from that Classic Cup, so all eyes would now be on prize cards for you. So how did that ascension up the Classic leaderboard go for you in round 22?
Yeah, g'day Stu, g'day viewers and listeners. Look, thanks for pointing out the loss last week in the Classic Cup. Of course, you had to do that. I understand that is fair. Look, I am eyeing up that position on the Classic leaderboard at the moment. It's still up in the air. There's quite a few sort of from that 15 to 20 range that are actually pushing into that top 10 based on coaches winning prizes in the other competitions. So it's really open sort of competition going into the last few rounds. I'm sitting 19th overall in that Classic leaderboard. I've got a little bit of work to go. I think I'm about 100 points behind the next best. So 1 or 2 pods here or there, and I could be right up in that chat with maybe my second prize card for the season, which would be unreal. Mate, however, talking about the Classic competition last week, we saw your name at the top of the list, and there was a massive pod play that you had that you kept quiet to yourself. Talk us through it.
Yeah, mate. First in Classic, thanks to one glorious pod in Jaden Campbell. Look, he was incredible against an informed Panthers team, really, that no one really gave the Titans much of a chance, except for me, of course. Look, I played Jaden Campbell card, and he scored 120 base points, which is amazing. But I played his diamond card for a monster 168. Look, since my elimination from the Classic Cup, I've been able to experiment with the Classic team a little bit more and go for some of those rogue plays. You know, plays that we play most weeks, but maybe don't necessarily have the best matchups on paper, and therefore a lot of coaches might leave them out. But rather than just having them in the side and getting their scores, I've been trying to load up on a bit of extra salary in them and hoping something like that pays off. And look, it did in a pretty nice way. And look, my English football team got a nice little upgrade as well, thanks to turning some of that prize money into packs as well. But really, all that was just one main pod compared to, you know, a really standard team based on a lot of the other teams that I made during the weekend. And it was really just that Jaden Campbell card plus a bit of a higher rarity there in the diamond. So, yeah, look, if anyone's sort of down and out in terms of leaderboard position and can't make their way to the top 20 or challenge you or I for one of those prize cards, now's the time to get a little bit funky and maybe not necessarily just listening to our picks, because you and I tend to go a little bit safer there. We're still in that prize card range. But look, a player like Jaden Campbell, who on his day can have a massive score, maybe it wasn't likely against the Panthers, but that's why you can win some of the big bucks. You go against the crowd and you can pay off handsomely.
Yeah, definitely. Congrats for that, mate. Well done. It was a big call. Obviously, JC up against the Panthers. You never know what could happen, but obviously there's going to be a few coaches following along now, particularly with Jaden Campbell. Before we jump in and have a chat about a few things, look, we've got a few people here joining us as always. Melissa is in the chat again. I think she was in here nice and early, as was Sif Kanga. Mel, we are going really well. We're looking forward to the weekend of footy ahead, as well as the final series coming up. As I said, Sif Kanga was here nice and early. I think he was here about half an hour before the show kicked off, so he was ready to go. And we see his caps lock still is not fixed, so it's great to see. And then Ryan P joining us again. He's really looking forward to getting his contender team sorted for round 23, and that'll be a big talking point as well as in terms of the salary pods and where we can look for options to load up on that salary when we've got the maximum rarity of a gold in contender. I think it's a great opportunity there to make some packs and get a little bit further in your game day squad journey and hopefully move into a higher competition in terms of the challenger or maybe the champion teams next year. Look, as always, you can see that the Fantasy Bros continue to have success across a range of competitions. We don't just limit ourselves to one or two. And a lot of that comes from our expert tips that we talk about each and every Wednesday night. We come to you right here on YouTube, the Fantasy Bros AU. We're also over on on Instagram and TikTok, and then we also are heavily involved with the GameDay squad Discord as well. Plus, if you cannot catch us live, which I know a few people aren't able to do, you can always catch up on the recording over on Spotify. Just search at Fantasy Bros AU across all platforms. And just quickly before we move on, massive shout out to Claire, who is listening to us on her way home from work. She's newly getting into GameDay squad, so hopefully she gets some tips from us tonight. G'day, Claire. Thanks for joining us.
Beautiful. Good to hear. Good on you, Claire. Good luck this weekend. Yeah, mate, still not too late for people to join as well. Like Claire would have, I'm sure, taken advantage of the code FBRL25 and got those 3 9-player common packs. Hopefully you got something nice, Claire, for your classic and contender squads. But look, Dill, still 5 weeks to go. We've got a finals competition as well. So the footy certainly does not end after 5 weeks. Still a really good opportunity to take advantage of those 27 players and try to juice out those squads, or maybe even hold on to those packs and open them next year as well. So just again, that code is FBRL25 for all new users. They can sign up using that code and they'll get those packs pretty quickly and juice up their squads. Just before we get into the positional previews, mate, bit of shout out to 4 players on screen. We got Gardy, we got Fez, Jax, and your nemesis, Bruiser. He knocked you out, didn't he?
Yes.
So those are the 4 left in the Classic Cup competition. We actually spoke about a few of these guys last week, but we're down to 4. Who's your money on, Dill?
Yeah, look, as much as I love Jaxie and what he contributes to GameDay squad, both, in terms of winning competitions, but also in the Discord, I've got to stick with my man Bruiser. I will be happy if he wins the whole thing. At least I can say that I lost to the champion of the Classic Cup. So yeah, my money's on Bruiser still. And then Gardy just seems to continue throwing up pods left, right, and centre. I think there was the Katoni Stags, the accidental Katoni Stags, I believe. Over Herbie Farnworth, who he forgot to move back into the squad after their bye the previous week. So Gardy's got all sorts of luck. So maybe we should really be following him and some of his tips as well. We might have to get him on the show if he does get up as the Classic Cup winner.
Actually, that's a great idea. Let's see if we can organise a bit of a guest appearance for the Classic Cup winner, or maybe even the 2 finalists after this round. My money's here on Big Jaxie, and I would love to see Gardy make a final as well. But that would mean the GOAT of GDS Fez would miss out. Fez has done well to get to a Final 4 for the rugby league, particularly that's probably his 4th strongest sport, but absolutely killing it. Good on you, boys, and best of luck this weekend. Still, let's get into some round 23 hookers. Who are you liking?
Let's get straight into it. Look, it's a pretty boring sort of option here for me, but it's just Blake Brayley. He just is probably the best pick of the hookers for the season, really. He's up against the Dragons this week, and across the season, the starting hookers have have scored an average of 41 against the Dragons. And a lot of them aren't 80-minute players, though, and we know that Blake Brayley is. And he had a massive game earlier in the season against the Dragons in round 15, where he scored 90 points and sort of went on that bit of a run that we've enjoyed over the last few weeks. And the thing for me is the promising part of that 90 points was mostly done in base and power. He had 122 run meters, which was the most of this season for him. He had 52 tackles and 3 tackle breaks. That's 71 points just in base and power there alone. So we can expect something similar. I'll be pretty happy to play Blake Brayley and just not be, overthink it too much.
Yeah, I'm with you there, mate. I think I got a little bit cute last week and tried to play Harry Grant as well as Blake Brayley in a couple of squads. And look, I expected him to go a little bit better without Jerome Hughes there, maybe taking a bit more control of the footy, direct the play a bit more through the centre and have his fingerprints on a few more try assists and that sort of thing. But there was a bit of a middling score that a lot of sort of middle and edge forwards outscored anyway. So, yeah, I don't think I'll go back to the well and play both. There's really no need to. And we've got a few upside in the edge forward, in the middle forward position. And Blake Brayley's absolutely killing it here at hooker. Let's hope the Dragons haven't rewatched that round 15 film to see where Blake Brayley demolished them, because they might be a little bit smarter in terms of how they defend him. But yeah, he was just on fire. Look, this match between the Sharkies and Dragons is always a little bit maybe closer than some may expect. That little derby there. Hopefully the weather's good, so Blake Brayley can be running out of hooker and scoring plenty of points for our fantasy squads. But yeah, look, I think he's a lock and load in that position, and a pretty simple one.
Yep, definitely agree. Look, before we jump on to the next position, we've got a few people joining us over on TikTok. Thank you very much for joining us there. Zenny has commented, when is merch releasing? I'm assuming she's talking about the Fantasy Bros merch, which was meant to be a bit of a secret, but I guess the cat's out of the bag. We are doing a few things in the background, and potentially merch might be one of those. So thanks, Xenia, for giving away that secret. And then, as you said, there's a couple of options outside of Blake Brayley. Look, we've got Sif Kanger that's going with Starling this week. Starling up against Manly, potentially an option. Always, we keep talking about Starling and the concern that we have with Owen Paddy and the minutes there and the minute share. The other thing for me is Manly have restricted hookers this last sort of month or so to only 32 GDS points. So I think their defensive work through the middle is a little bit better, and it's more about getting them on the outside, I think, for players up against Manly. So we'll talk about a couple of options there a little bit later on. Obviously, Harry Grant up against the Broncos as well, but the Broncos are even better at limiting hookers. They're limiting them at the moment, the last month or so of 40 to only 26 GDS points. So for me, I think, although Harry Grant is probably better than a lot of hookers that have played the Broncos in the last few weeks, I think it's probably better to just sit Harry this week and just watch and be happy with your Brayley shout.
Yeah, I just hope it's not one of those weeks where Harry Grant has a big game and then I look to play him next week and then he goes quiet and I'm sort of playing chess when he's playing checkers and I'm picking him on the weeks that he's going poorly and I'm sitting him on the weeks that he's going well. So yeah, I think we just play Blake Brayley. We know he's going to go pretty well and he's got plenty of upside there. He's done it once already against the Dragons. So I like it. Sif's probably playing a little bit of catch up. Maybe he's gone for that pot in maybe every single position. Tommy Starling, can be awesome on his day. 68 minutes isn't crazy in terms of low numbers compared to 80, but still, you really want that hooker on the field for as long as possible. And Starling can have a big score in him for sure. Mate, hooker's pretty boring this week, but middle forwards, it's almost like a bit of an origin or a big bye week, isn't it, without being able to talk about the likes of Terrell May and Isaiah Yeo. Newsflash, it's not. We're well past the major buys in origin, but the Tigers are on a bye and Isaiah Yeo has that shoulder complaint. So we spoke about those two as being part of the big three, and we just plug and play those two alongside Payne Haas and then maybe even look to put in 4 edge forwards, 2 on the field and 2 on the bench as well. But we now have to make some more decisions around our middle forward selection. And we've got a couple here on the page. Who are you looking to start there alongside Payne Haas?
I guess the first one for me is probably going to be Aaron Clark. We obviously have seen Aaron Clark's sort of 4-round average be around 50 GDS points, and that's purely through his base and power. It has coincided with a slight decrease in minutes, which is quite interesting considering, the last couple of weeks we've talked about the Warriors going through that injury crisis and there's definitely some more opportunity for some middle forwards to get some minutes. So quite interesting that the last sort of 4 rounds he's had a bit of a decrease, but I think Clark's just a safe play for me. You talked at the start of the show that we are pretty risk averse when we come to our fantasy sports. So we kind of play those safe options and then look for some upside in certain positions. So for me, Clark's that safe play we can rely on to get that probably 50 odd points in base and power, and then potentially have a ceiling of maybe 60 if he has a couple of offloads and maybe a try assist or something along those lines. The other thing for me, Bulldogs allow the 4th most points to middle in this last month. And if we filter that to starting middles, that average increases to 47 points. So I'm pretty happy to run with that, considering Clark and the Warriors are sort of looking for some form, and the Bulldogs are probably coming off a pretty big loss, and they might be looking, to exact some revenge. But I feel like the Warriors need to do the same thing as well. So for me, the first one is Clark. The next 2 are quite interesting, and I guess we've got a couple of differing opinions here. Do you want to talk us through one of your options in Jamin Jolliffe, who we probably haven't seen too often on the board, but it's a bit of a different pick?
Yeah, hopefully a good friend of the show, Penrith, is listening, because he actually made a joke about Jermaine Jolliffe and Gardy being someone who's likely to play a Jermaine Jolliffe in his side, and he'd scored 2 tries when Gardy was the only one that played someone like Jermaine Jolliffe. But Hey, he's quietly been going about his business really, really well in the last couple of rounds, and that's coincided with Tino Fa'asuamaleaui's injury, where he hasn't been
Yes.
able to take the field. So Jermaine Jolliffe has had scores of 57 and 59 in those past two rounds without Tino, and amongst those numbers, there are only 4 tackle breaks and 2 offloads with absolutely no other attacking stats outside it. But we have seen that he can score a try close to the line, and when he's getting these types of minutes and these types of scores without anyone else really on the field apart from Mofo, that's going to take a number of those hit ups or tackles away from him. I really like him as a bit of a safe play in that middle forward position, a bit like Aaron Clark, really, whose minutes have been all over the park. But we know that this role of Jolliffe will continue for as long as Tino's not there. And yeah, some scores really close to 60 with a bit of extra upside is pretty cool as well. We just seen the Rabbitohs concede 60 points. They were pretty poor through the middle. There's every chance Jolliffe may get an extra tackle break or 2, an offload, maybe even a line break or a try. A score above 60, be laughing. Wouldn't surprise me if Gardy actually did have Jermaine Jolliffe in his team this week. So yeah, I don't mind that. It's probably at the expense of someone like a Lindsay Smith, who probably looks a lot better, maybe safer on paper, playing for a better club, bigger name, has that origin experience. He's played 70 minutes in Isaiah Yo's absence in round 12, but the other 2 games without Isaiah Yo, he still only played 55 minutes when named at prop. I was really hoping he'd be named in that number 13 jersey, but looks like Isaiah Papali'i has got his hands on that jersey once again. Unless there's a late swap and Lindsay Smith does run out there in the prop jersey, I still only really see that 55 minutes next to his name, and probably not as much upside as one might hope without Isaiah Yo. But I think you are leaning in that direction, are you?
Yeah, at the moment, I've got Lindsay Smith as my 4th option. So at the moment, I'm going to run 4 middles and 2 edges and then the 1 hooker at this stage. So I do have Smith as that 4th option sitting on my bench. And I'm just kind of hoping, as you say, for him to be moved to that lock role. Even if he's not, though, I don't mind him for the simple fact that Isaiah Papali'i, when he has played lock, he only averages 49 minutes this season. So it's not like there's a lot of workload there. And then there's minutes to be had across the park in the middle there with people like Henry, Eisenhuth and Sorensen, who have all played through the middle, but they've also played on an edge as well. So I think there's an opportunity for Smith to find some big minutes. And if he does, if he can average that 60 minutes on the field, I feel like that 60 GDS points is well in reach, which is actually what Smith has averaged in the last 3 rounds. So I think there's some upside there for Smith. And yeah, like you said, there's the play for me at the moment is to play Smith, but it's just going to be a cherry on top if he's moved to lock and he can get that 70 plus minutes, which would be amazing to see. But if he's not, then maybe there might be a little bit of a swap last minute to a potential 3rd edge, depending on if you can convince me of a 3rd edge in a whole lot of edges that we could definitely play, and we'll talk about in a moment. The last player that is making up my 4 of Haas, Clark and Smith is then Connor Watson as well. He's up against the Dolphins this week. I think it's going to be a big matchup. I actually have quite a few Roosters playing at the moment in my side. And I think the big thing is going to be, or the interesting watch is going to be that the Roosters are currently 9th and the Dolphins are 8th. Obviously, the Dolphins for and against is a lot better than the Roosters, but there's only 2 points between them on the table. And, this game could be probably a finals defining moment for either of the clubs. So I think it'll be a big game, and I think Watson probably will have a lot to do with it. I really like Watson's output over the last sort of month as well. He's averaging 53 GDS points across the last month. And we saw last week he actually came off the bench after 23 minutes, played out the rest of the game. But in that 57 minutes, he scored 66 GDS points. And that gets me pretty excited considering he started off the bench and he's scoring more than a point a minute. He has averaged 3 tackle breaks per game in the last month as well, which is great to see from Watson. And just to put the cherry on top, the Finns are giving up 44.5 GDS points to hookers in the last month, which has them ranked 2nd for points allowed across that month of footy. So I think Watson will have a big game in that hooker role. And if Brandon Smith is named in the on the bench, he is currently on the extended bench. If he finds his way onto the bench, hopefully Watson just moves back to that lock role for Victor Radley. He'll have a spell at some point during the game.
Yeah, it was a bit odd, Watson spending that first 23 minutes on the interchange bench, but it probably told us that his game doesn't change too much when he probably knows he's going to be out there for close to 80 minutes and he might pace himself a little bit more. Or if he knows he's just going to get that 57 straight, that workload didn't really change too much. He did only run for 45 meters. So obviously not being out on the field means he's less likely to run as frequently. But with that 45 meters, he still broke 4 tackles. So he's definitely capable of sniffing out the best opportunities to run. And he's pretty dangerous as well with his footwork, that he can break a tackle on most occasions. So 45 meters, but 4 tackle breaks is pretty cool. And he made his normal 36 tackles. So I don't know. It was an odd move, but it obviously worked in terms of GDS scoring. If he gets moved to the interchange bench again, I might sort of question his start in my team. But I do really like him. He's got some really good attacking upside, and like you mentioned, those statistics there are pretty favourable. We've got a couple of comments here in the chat. Let's start with Benny Austin first of all. He's asked us about Paddy Carrigan, and then our man Skip has asked about Tapine. Look, we only cover sort of those 6 players on the visuals each week, and look, if we could do 8, 10, Carrigan and Tapine would be there just about every week as well. There's probably the middle forward position has the least disparity between the biggest scores and the lowest scores by some of these guns. So look, if you wanted to interchange a Paddy Carrigan or a Joe Tapine for a Clark or a Jolliffe or a Smith or a Watson, it's probably not going to change the outcome by maybe 2 to 4 points. But of those 2 names, mate, any love for Carrigan or Tapine?
I'm off both of them this week. Carrigan for me, with Haas back, I think his workload decreases slightly. I'm just not sure about whether I play Carrigan or not with Haas back in the side. I think Haas will do a lot of work there. Storm obviously are a big side as well, and that'll be a fight up against the Broncos. The other thing is that Melbourne Storm are restricting middles at the moment to about 35 points, and so obviously if Haas has a big game, then Carrigan might not. So I'm just a little bit wary there of loading up on both players. And then for me, Tapine, again, like you said, he probably gets you that 45 to 50 points, which isn't much different to, say, an Aaron Clark potentially, or maybe a Jamin Jolliffe. And I guess for me, the upside in Aaron Clark is the potential of increased minutes, which we've seen throughout the season. There's probably also an upside of Tapine maybe crossing the line once or twice, which we've seen this season as well. But I don't want to rely on try scoring ability, which is something similar, I would say, for Adam Fanua-Blake as well. We've obviously seen his try scoring prowess drop quite significantly. And as a result, he's not scoring as well as he was in the past, particularly for the Warriors. So Tapine is another one of those guys that sort of run out for his 50, 55 minutes and scores 50 to 55 GDS points, but he's also on a rolling 3-game average of 45 over the past month. So I'm just being a bit cautious there and probably playing something just a little bit safer at the moment.
Yeah, just really interesting on Tapine. I think we've spoken about middles for far too long, but he's always sort of comes into calculation toward the end of the season, doesn't he? So that post-Origin period, he's obviously gets a number of spells during that time since he's not needed for Origin given his heritage, and he's always sort of that player at the end of the season that we want to plug in our side. He just hasn't shown a lot of that form of recent end of year runs, but 67 minutes on the weekend just gone is a big change from 49, 47, 29, 53, 48, 50, 43 before that. If that 67 minutes or upwards of 60 continues, I think he'll definitely be on our sheet for the rest of the season, and we know he's definitely got the pedigree. The Raiders within, they've got one hand on that minor premiership, don't they? The Dogs let him off last week after losing the Tigers after the Raiders lost the night beforehand. Could have been a lot closer at the top of that competition ladder, but the Raiders won't want to let that. Skip has mentioned he likes Watson, Clark, and Haas. He's playing 4 edges this week. Skip, let us know which 4 you are playing. Dill, I know that you and I are pretty locked into 2 of them, and then our third and potentially fourth could be one of maybe 4 to 6 blokes. Who do you like Let's start with the two obvious ones, though. Hudson Young, Jacob Preston, I presume. That they'll be in your side just about every single week they're named, I presume.
Yeah, that's right. They're probably the two elite edges that I will just continue to plug and play each and every week now that we've lost the likes of Lucas and Homole, etc. I think these two are just sort of head and shoulders above any of those other names on screen at the moment, and you can probably rely on them a little bit more. Young, another player is sort of coming off a couple of down games compared to his standard. We've also seen, obviously, the try scoring drop off a little bit from him. He's got his 3-round rolling average of 52 GDS points, which I think, if you look at him and what he's produced throughout the season, maybe some coaches will look at that and go, that's a little bit concerning that he's only scoring 52 points against teams such as the Dragons, the Knights, and the Eagles that he's played the last 3 weeks. Maybe they might jump off Young and sort of be looking elsewhere. So potentially there could be a little bit of a pod opportunity there, albeit a small one, because I'd say most coaches will sort of stick true to what Young has produced in the past. And I'm not perturbed too much by those, the 3-round sort of average. And I'm more excited about what Young can do and what we know he can do, particularly against a team like Manly, who in the last month have allowed almost 48 points to the left edge across the last month of footy. And we know that the Raiders have played the Seagulls earlier in the season. And in that first encounter, Young scored 65 with a try. So there's some vulnerability there. And Young, obviously, like I said, sort of coming off a bit of a drought, potentially in try scoring compared to what we saw earlier in the season. So maybe he gets over for a couple to add on to his potential of 50 plus in base. And then that second player, Jacob Preston, he just continues to do some awesome things, some presto things. His last month of footy, he's seen an average of 57, which is equal to the rest of his season's output. And again, that might deter some coaches. They will look at that and think, he's not really improving throughout the season. But I think that's an absolute positive that we know exactly what we're going to get, no matter the matchup data, no matter the scenario for the Bulldogs or for Jacob Preston. We know we can rely on him for his 55 to 60 and then a potential ceiling of up to 80 GDS points, which we've seen from Jacob Preston this season. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy to lock and load those two. And look, there are probably 3 or 4 options that I like outside of that, but the biggest one that I'm going to fade, the main one that I'm fading is Ali Katoa. He's had a horrible sort of 3 weeks of footy after we talked him up big time going back a month or so. And then he comes up against the Broncos, who have restricted the right edge side to only 16.5 GDS points in the last month of footy. So I'm completely off Ali Katoa. Obviously, without Hughes there, that just makes it an even easier option to stay off him.
16 points to right edge is insane. Wow, yeah, something really interesting. Look, he hasn't really crossed my mind for this week either. Given those two blokes you mentioned, what I really like about Hutto and Preston is that they're both playing for teams that probably should have won their fixtures in round 22, and both teams lost. It could have been quite detrimental to their minor premier aspirations. Thankfully, it probably wasn't for the Raiders. But look, both of those teams will be smarting this weekend and will be wanting to put a solid 80 minutes on the park after last week's loss. So, look, if the Raiders are amongst some points, Hutto Young is certainly very likely to have a try or two himself. And look, Preston in the wet last week, Dogs weren't great, but he was still outstanding, probably one of the best on the field. We got Skip in the chat saying that he's almost forced to play Angus Crichton because he owns his legend card, his 1.5x multiplier. How good. A lot of confidence there, though, with the language that Skip's used there, kind of forced into. I think you're probably a bit higher there on Skip this week for playing an Angus Crichton. Is that the case?
Yeah, he would be my third option if I was going to run the 3 edges, which I still might, to be honest. Lindsay Smith might find his way out of my squad, and I might bring Angus Crichton in up against the Dolphins. Again, I said it before, it could be a massive game, and Crichton's last month has taken a massive jump up in his GDS scoring from his average of 44 to averaging 56 GDS points. That average is boosted by his 14 tackle breaks in the last month of footy, last 3 games of footy, and then 2 tries on top of that as well, which we haven't really seen too much of from Gussie earlier in the season. So it's quite nice to see he getting over the line. The other thing I like is Capewell notched up 61.5 GDS points against the Dolphins last week in a losing effort. And Gussie will be lining up in that same spot up against Oren Keeley, who has missed 17 tackles in his last 3 games. That is 17 missed tackles opposite Angus Crichton, who we just talked about, 14 tackle breaks in his last 3 games. So for me, that equates to at least 11 tackle breaks from Angus Crichton this weekend.
There you go, Skip. Hopefully a bit of extra confidence there to back your Angus Crichton legend play. Dill, we spoke about your bench makeup. Can you just run me through? You've got 4 middles, is that right? You've got your 2 edges at the moment, and you've got your hooker. I think you're playing one short.
I could be. I am. Well done. Good pickup. This is how confusing. This is how confusing my day has been, going between about 5 different blokes in about 3 different positions across almost every line, every position. It's just a tough week, and we'll talk about halves in a moment. The struggle we're having there. We'll talk about the fullback position as well. I've got so many players running through my mind. So then there's an easy play for me. Then I will put Angus Crichton straight into my squad. Thank you for picking that up. Unreal.
5 blokes in 3 positions sound like an exhausting day for anyone. Mate, some people might have had a bit of a giggle when they looked at this list on screen. For those listening on their drive to work on Thursday morning, we've got Beau Fermor and Jordan Ricky as the 2 names we haven't really touched on. And yes, that is right. You didn't miss here. It is Jordan Ricky. Would you believe he was actually a late inclusion it was my challenger side that finished 6th overall for the week, mind you. Last week, he scored a respectable 60, and that was, I think, in pure base. Look, there was 70 points approximately scored in the actual NRL as well, which meant, a lot of goal kicking, a lot of watching goal kicking. But look, he's a player that's been quietly going about his business pretty well without really any attack, but getting through plenty of work, sort of being that bodyguard for Adam Reynolds over there on the right-hand side. Yeah, tough matchup with the Storm there, but these sort of grinding games without a lot of points played, predominantly through the middle and down the edges, sort of an opportunity for someone like Jordan Ricky to get that 50 to 60 in base, but an edge forward in a tight match is always, a bit of a chance to score a try there as well. So probably not for the people that just want to play it safe, probably more so for the risk takers out there, but just goes to show what a crazy time of the year it is when we're talking about Jordan Ricky as a potential play, and he actually found his way into my squad last week.
If it helps you in any way and makes you feel a little bit better, the Melbourne Storm are allowing 35 to right edges in the last month, which is slightly above their season average of about 30 to 32. So again, there's some potential there to exploit that Melbourne left side defence.
Beauty. We got Rainsy in here as well, playing the 4 edges. Let us know, Rainsy, who are those 4? Are they 4 we've got on screen, or have you got a pod that you can let us know and we can talk about a little bit later? Still, the halves position. Let's get cracking into some backs now. We haven't had a really similar list last week, but there's a new face on a list that hasn't featured on our top 6 halves for all of season 2025. Is Sammy Walker down there a bit of a selection headache for you, and one of your maybe 3rd, 4th, or 5th option to fill into those 3 spots you've got available?
Yeah, this is one of the dilemmas that I've found myself with today. Looking at the list: Cleary, Fogarty, JC, Hines, and then Sammy Walker, and I've got to pick 3. Obviously, Cleary's locked in, so that means 2 from 4, which is quite a difficult task. I really like Sammy Walker. We obviously saw him return earlier in the month, and he's had a couple of decent games over the last month of footy. He's averaging 46 GDS points in 4 games. He's kicked 16 goals, had 9 try assists. He needs to tidy up his tackle break to miss tackle ratio, though, a little bit. So that's concerning for me. It's currently 1 to 3. So it's never good to see more missed tackles than tackle breaks. So if he can sort of negate or minimize those missed tackles, I feel like he'll be a really good option. If we take those tackle breaks away, or those missed tackles away, Walker's averaging 43 in base and power, and he's currently running about or just above 2 try assists per game in those 4 games. So, look, I think Sammy Walker is probably going to be my pod of the week. Let that out a little bit, but obviously he wouldn't be on many people's minds. But I think the opportunities there. They're playing the Dolphins, who have allowed 65 to the halves in the last month. That's including Hines 100 and 73. So I think I might. I don't know yet, because it means that I would have to not play one of Fogarty or Jaden Campbell, and that's going to be quite difficult. I'll let you know that I'm definitely playing a Sam Walker diamond in my challenger side. So challenger is sort of where I throw a bit of something at the wall and see if it sticks. And Sammy Walker is one of those definitely this week. So I need a bit of convincing to either go with Fogarty or JC. And if that doesn't happen, if I can't find an upside to either of those, then Sammy Walker definitely finds his way into my classic side.
Still no try for Sam Walker yet, despite averaging a pretty solid 46. You'd expect him to run the footy a little bit more over the coming weeks when he gets a little bit more confident into those a bit more confidence into those legs. But just a quick list here of players who have scored more tries than Sam Walker in season 2025. We've got Cohen Hess, Jack DeBell and Liam LeBlanc, Sean Keppie, Lachlan Hubner, Morgan Smithies, Matt Croker, Corey Jensen, Jack Todd. There you go. So Sammy Walker will want to right a few wrongs, I think, pretty soon. You said it just at the top of this section. You said you love Sammy Walker. I'm sorry, but I don't love him. He's killing some of the other Roosters backs that we love to play, like James Tedesco. Mark Nawonga-Nitawase has fallen off the face of the cliff just in the last couple of weeks as well. But and that's sort of coincided with the return of Sam Walker. Look, not for me this week. I think, you'd be a brave man to leave out Jaden Campbell after what we saw him do against Penrith last week. And what I really loved, despite them actually losing, was just sort of the emotion he showed at the end of the game. Not only was he fighting for that entire match into Golden Point there as well, but look, he was heartbroken. He was disappointed. He knew that the boys came so close to pulling off one of the greatest comebacks ever, and getting a win over Penrith, who are absolutely flying at the moment and looking to go another one, add to their trophy cabinet. So it meant a lot to him that they lost there at the end. So it shows that there's still a lot of sort of passion, a lot of ticker still in not just him, but probably the Titans as a whole as well. And that they'll certainly want to be fighting to avoid that wooden spoon. And look, that match, that wooden spoon battle probably comes a couple of weeks early than the end of the season, with Titans against the Rabbitohs this week. There are a couple of really good players named on the Rabbitohs interchange bench that could make this game a little bit tighter on paper. But look, if the Titans are going to scrape any more wins between now and the end of the season, they'll definitely want to get a win here against the Rabbitohs. The Rabbitohs just had 60 points put on them against the Broncos. The Titans are a wonderfully attacking side. They can certainly concede a number of points themselves. So look, this game could be 40 points to 38. And if the Titans are scoring 40 points, Jaden Campbell's got his fingerprints over all of those, probably scored one himself, kicked 6 goals, and probably a nice solid 80 GDS points. So for me, a really simple lock into that second halves position. And for me, it just comes down to Fogarty, Nicho Hines, Jamal Fogarty. Canberra had a terrible match last week, put a red line through that. The conditions were terrible. They didn't even let fans onto the hill. The weather was that bad. Canberra don't want to play in the pouring rain. They're happy to play in the freezing cold, in the snow, down there in the nation's capital. I think, if anything, that just means Fogarty is going to be less played across the park. People are going to look at his recent scores and go, no way, he must be out of form. The Raiders are not finals contenders anymore. Rubbish. This is a big bounce back week for the Raiders. They'll want to get a few things right leading into the end of the season, and it probably starts now after that. Bit of a wake up call. Brought back down to earth a little bit there, and I think Jamal Fogarty, will get back to his solid 50s again this week.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And like you said, a horrible game, horrible conditions. Fogarty's kicking meters were way down. His missed tackles were up. He recorded his most errors of the season in that game as well, of 5. So, yeah, we can't expect too much. We put a line through that. The previous 3 games, he averaged 68 across those 3 games. So I'm happy to stick with him and expect his score sort of return to that median that we know that he can produce of around 50 to 60 points. Look, he's up against Manly as well, who sort of been up and down all season, really. It's been quite hard to get a read on Manly and sort of the team that's being running out into the park, but they've allowed 57 in the past month to right side halves. So that includes a 70 from Jerome Hughes in round 20. So I think there's opportunity there for folks. And then on Jaden Campbell, look, I asked myself 3 questions today. Am I chasing last week's 120 points? And I probably am. Do I care? I don't really care at all. And then the third question I asked, is he better than his dad? And I think he is. I think he's an absolute freak. And I'm going to put it out there that I think he's better than his dad, Preston Campbell. And look, JC's average over the last two games is 102 points. And then his average over the last month is 72. That last game, he had 11 tackle breaks and ran 240 meters. That's double what he's been running each and every week for his season average. So he probably won't do that again. It's probably unlikely that he does that. But even with a reduced running meters, he's still averaging over 55 in base and power this season. So I think with the opportunity up against the Rabbits, potentially depleted, there obviously, as you said, there's a couple of names there on that list that might come into the side. I don't know if it changes too much. It's a pretty horrible looking Rabbitohs side after that 60-point loss. And they've been allowing 55 to right halves in the last month as well. So I think Campbell's got every opportunity to go big. And then, as you said, that means that potentially Hines misses out. And he's been having a decent month of footy. We've seen him, obviously kick off that month with his ton against the Dolphins and then following up with 350-plus scores, which has been pretty consistent, which is great to see. And I think that sort of coincides with him becoming the more dominant playmaker as well. He's sort of getting his hands on the ball a little bit more. Trindle's scores have dropped off quite significantly over the last month. And I think then it just means Hines is getting his hands on the ball and is looking a little bit more dangerous. The Dragons, again, another team that's been up and down with their defense as well, particularly against right side halves. In the last month, they've restricted 2 scores to 25, obviously one of them being Fogarty last week. And then they've also given up 55 and 67. So pretty hard to get a read on the potential that Hines has up against the Dragons. It could be any type of Dragons side that could be thrown out there. Obviously, like you said, the conditions as well weren't favourable, but they still were able to limit one of the best halves in the game to a pretty low score. So if that happens with Hines, I'll be kicking myself that I didn't play Fogarty or JC. So yeah, I think for me, Cleary, the obvious choice, probably the salary pot again of the week. Just load up on Cleary each and every week. Doesn't matter sort of who he's playing up against. The benefit as well, Knights are giving up 61 to right halves in the last month, so Cleary should cook. So yeah, for me, Cleary, Fogarty and JC just edging out Hines and Sammy Walker.
And you probably give Hines and Sammy Walker a run in some of the comps you're sort of not prioritising as much.
Definitely. Yeah, I'll be looking, like I said, that Sammy Walker diamond in Challenger, and then probably Hines diamond in maybe Champion or maybe pairing him in Challenger as well and going big in that Challenger comp. We'll just see. Yeah,
I think this is a good week where you can look to play a couple of different combinations depending on how many teams you're entering each week. I think it's a really good time to do that particularly with your halves position outside of Nathan Cleary. The next 4 or 5. We could see a lot of difference between, even someone like Tommy Dearden come back into form. He's had some massive games over the last month. We'll have some better weather that will suit his game of footy, and he'll be off people's minds. But there's every chance that he can, score enough to get into that top 2 or 3 this week again. Righto, mate. The centre position. There's one glaring omission from this list, and no, it's not because his team is on the bye. Herbie Farnworth was probably in line for a record or a cricket score, really. 50 points in 19 minutes of rugby league before he succumbed to that hamstring injury. He still scored 50. He was in a lot of pain, but could he not have just offloaded that ball immediately to his right? I know Hammer sort of overran him when he clutched that hammy and stopped, but
yeah,
Herbie it was just self-preservation, wasn't it? He was grabbing that hammy. He forgot about where he was, who was on his outside. He just needed to pop that ball, and that would have been an extra maybe 6 or so points, but they all add up. But 50 points inside 90 minutes, he was on for absolutely anything. You could have written his ticket. We can't pick Herbie Farnworth now, so we've got a big decision to make, and that's not just for one centre position, but it's 2 centre positions this week. Where are you going?
Yeah, it does make it a little bit more difficult. I'll leave one particular player on that screen for you to talk about in a moment. For me, it's the second position that I'm struggling with. I think the first is easy. The second for me is a toss-up at the moment between probably 3 players again, and that's in Garrick, Timoko, and then I've also got a little bit of a pod on the outer there in Jesse Ramian. So for me at the moment, I'm going with Timoko. I think his last month of footy has been unreal. He's been probably one of the Raiders' best in a squad that have got some unreal talent in terms of Fogues and Young, etc. there. So Timoko's pushing a 65 4-game average over the last month of footy. It's 20 points more than his season average before that. The thing, though, that I guess sort of you got to temper that expectation a little bit is that he's crossed the line 4 times in the past 2 games. However, it's been the supporting stats along with that I've really liked and that's really impressed me. 24 tackle breaks and 7 line breaks in 4 games. Plus, he's pushing 180 running meters per game, which is sort of giving him a base and power of about 50 in the last month, which again is 10 points more than his season average for base and power. So even if we take those 4 tries away, he's still got that really good base and power in a sort of a position where we would rely on that quite a bit. There's not always those attacking stats that we can get from the centres or the wingers in particular. Like we talk about, they're quite volatile. And so for me, Timoko's a pretty easy play. I think the other one that I said that I really like, who's a bit more of a risk, is Jesse Ramian. He's a three-round rolling average of 41 GDS points, and he's had minimal attacking stats. I think in that he had 1 try and maybe 1 line break to go with it. His base and power for the year has been pretty consistent, around about 40 points, which has been very similar throughout sort of the season as well in terms of that limiting the attacking options that he's got. He hasn't had a lot of attacking stats this season. Round 23, though, against the Dragons, really could see a flip in that. The player that I just talked about in Timoko scored 69 GDS points, included 2 tries that were, some pretty special tries, sort of got through 3 or 4 tackles and made a couple of tackle breaks in that and was able to cross the line twice in pretty good fashion. So there's an opportunity there for Jesse Ramian in the same position where the Dragons have been allowing 58 points to that position in the last month of footy. So there's definitely an opportunity there. So for me, the safety is probably Timoko. The risk is probably Ramian. And I'm not sure how I want to go yet. I've obviously got to chase a few points as well. So I do need to take a bit of a risk. So it might be the Jesse Ramian option this week and hope that it pays off.
Two really good names mentioned there, but you're not even considering Dane Gagai. Look, I haven't got to my number one just yet, but look, I don't mind Dane Gagai, despite having a match up there with the Penrith Panthers. Look, in addition to the South Sydney Rabbitohs, the Penrith Panthers are still giving up a considerable amount of points. I think you might have the numbers in front of you there, to opposition fullbacks. And it hasn't just been a trend over the past couple of weeks. It's been a trend for most of the season, hasn't it? Last week, we saw what AJ Brimson did to them. 79 points without a try at fullback for AJ. Now Gagai's moved to that role as a fullback without Jackson Hastings there in the team. You'd expect him to have the kicking tee as well. So that adds a little bit of safety if the Knights can cross the try line and he can kick a couple of goals. But look, since his move to the fullback position, a lot of the players is going through him, and he just works from the first minute to the 80th minute. He'll run the ball as hard as he is in the first minute as he does in the 80th minute, and he's breaking tackles all the way through as well. He's got a number of scores sort of around that 60 or above, and that's without the kicking duties. He's someone that can score a try or set a few up. He breaks tackles for fun. I don't mind Dane Gagai as a fullback that we can slot into the centre position. The matchup doesn't scare me. Like I said, AJ Brimson last week, 79 without the try. And he's the other talking point for this section, of course, against the South Sydney Rabbitohs, who we've said so many times in just about every single podcast to play the fullback that's playing against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. The matchups don't get any better than this. And we can even put a centre into our team. We don't even have to fill up a fullback position. to get the fullback playing against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. So Brimson at centre makes so much sense for me. I'm so annoyed that he scored well last week against Penrith, because he'll be on the mind of a lot of coaches now. Look, if he had have got a 30 or a 35 last week, would not have changed a thing. He would have been the first centre picked for me, and you, I'm sure, as well. But because he did score a lot against Penrith last week, and people think, they're so good defensively that if he's scoring well against them, then he can do it against anyone, and he'll be in the team for the rest of the year. Look, he could have been a super pod. I think he'll still be a little bit of a pod, but coupled with the score last week, we don't have Herbie Farnworth. I think a lot of coaches will flock to AJ. We saw Edwards score 120 against the Rabbitohs a couple of weeks back. They've got similar running games where they both break tackles. AJ's probably even a little bit more creative, and he can pop up on both sides of the field. His show and go, his dummy, and his kicking game can also lead to a number of points being scored as well. So the fact that we can play AJ as a centre and get his score as a fullback against the Rabbitohs, yes, please. And I think he's in line for a big one this week.
Yeah, I agree. Look, just on the numbers for Dane Gagai up against the Penrith Panthers in the last month, the Panthers have allowed 58 to fullbacks, which is slightly above their season average of around 50 to 53. So that actually has them as the third best in terms of allowing points to fullbacks. So I think Gagai is a good shout for me. I'm concerned about the Knights in general and what they have left to offer. Yeah. There's obviously a lot going on there, and there's a number of changes, particularly in the halves again this week as well. And some of their best players are out with injury. So yeah, I just don't know what more the Knights have to offer. But that doesn't mean that Dane Gagai won't have a big game. That's just sort of my reservation. And look, that's just anecdotal. It's nothing to do with stats. But if we just go purely on stats, I think Dane Gagai would be up there with Brimo as well. So I'm probably going to play Dane Gagai across my challenger and champion as well, just to mix that up. But yeah, for me, Brimson is just a no-brainer. We talk about him each at the fullback position against the Rabbitohs each and every week. And as you touched on, 120 points to Edwards a couple of weeks ago, 51 to Kennedy. And then Walsh was looking like he was going to have a horrible game and we were going to jinx it. But he pulled a rabbit out of the hat and finished on 56. And I think we were just talking before, he was on about 19 with about 20 minutes to go or something like that. So obviously that was a bit scary, but Walsh again finishing on 56. I think there's every opportunity for Brimson to have a big game. And like you said, there's nothing better than playing someone that is out of position according to GDS versus real life when there's plenty of upside there. And with no Herbie this week, having Brimo as a centre in GDS, but playing at fullback, it's just an absolute blessing. And it makes sort of those centre decisions so much easier. So yeah, Brimson's my first. I'd probably just stick with Timoko at the moment, but plenty of options in terms of Dane Gagai or Jesse Ramian if I want to go a little bit different and potentially pot up in a few different positions.
Love it. And that's not even mentioning a couple of the other names on screen there. And Ruben Garrick, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck has been really good lately. They've got a tough matchup with the Bulldogs, but Stephen Crichton would be another centre option this week for some coaches. We saw him play a bit of a hybrid role there with Jacob Kiraz, despite Kiraz wearing the number 1 jersey and playing fullback in defence. They sort of swapped and rotated. You sort of saw Critter walk toward the centre of the field and sort of point and tell Kiraz to get back out wide. So there's a bit of a game plan there for Critter to roam both sides of the field and attack closer to the line. And he almost scored one in the first couple of minutes, and he put Kiraz over a little bit later in the game as well. So there's another centre on top of Brimson, on top of Gagai, who's going to spend plenty of time there at fullback. He's also kicking goals, just like Gagai. So yeah, look, a couple of really good options there at the centre position, but I don't think we can be really confident to tell you exactly what that final order of those 6 players might be. And with the volatile, how volatile that position is, there's every chance that a couple of players outside of that 6 or 8 that you've mentioned with Ramian, there's every chance that someone else finds the podium for the centres for the week. Mate, so I don't think there'll be much of a discussion for the wing position.
Not at all.
Plenty of good names there on screen, but I think we want to load up with fullbacks again. And the wingers haven't really been getting it done consistently outside of the likes of Kiraz, Toto, and Zach Lomax. Are you looking anywhere else this week, or are your 2 going to come from those 3?
No, you nailed it on the head there. The two options that I'm going with are Karaz and To'o for very simple reasons that they just offer so much more than the rest of the wingers at the moment. Lomax is an option there as well, up against the Cowboys, who allow 46 to right wingers in the last month. Lomax has had a couple of down games. We're not quite sure how the Parramatta Eels are going to go. They've had a couple of sort of up and down moments as well. So for me, I'm just going to stick with those two in Karaz and To'o. As you touched on, Karaz obviously named at fullback last week, named at fullback again this week. Be interesting to see what happens with him and Stephen Crichton, whether they mix it up a little bit again. So I'll be interested to see that. But the Warriors are allowing 54 GDS points to fullbacks in the last month, which is 10 points more than their season average. So I'm happy just to lock and load in Karaz. And even if he does move back to the right side on the wing there as well, the Warriors are still allowing an average of 40 to the right side the last month. So there's plenty of opportunity, I think, for Karaz to still go down that side and have a big game as well. We've obviously seen him break tackles, eat up the meters, and then have that offload primed and ready, and then also getting over the line is sort of coming stock standard for Karaz as well. So I'm happy to just lock and load him. Again, another player that's playing out of position in real life compared to on GDS, and I think I'll exploit that as much as possible. And then To'o, look, I said last week if To'o didn't cross the line, we'd still expect about 40-odd points off the back of his base and power, and that's pretty much exactly what he delivered. Again, didn't cross the line, which I cannot fathom at the moment how he's not getting across the line, but that's a different story. But he now comes up against a pretty soft defensive combination of Best and Marju, where we've seen a number of missed tackles throughout the game. In fact, between them, they're missing 3.5 tackles per game. So I think To'o might have a few tackle breaks there, and hopefully he crosses the line. And again, if he doesn't, we know we can bank on his 40-odd points and be happy with that. Whereas someone like Lomax or Nawaka Nituazi could come away with that 20 that we've seen in the past, or they could have big games as well. It's just so volatile. So I think I'll just stick with some safety.
Yep, with you there. Can't argue too much about that. We know that it's going to happen eventually for Brian To'o. There's every chance he gets 2 or 3, in clumps very soon, and you don't want to be taking him out of your team when that happens. We've seen him break 18 tackles in a match just last season. So, look, his upside is incredible. The Penrith Panthers are on fire. A lot of the play is going down the left, but we know they're a quality side with Cleary and Edwards predominantly moving the ball to the right. It's got to happen for Brian To'o eventually. He even had that, just that one sort of run reminded you of just how damaging he can be last week. He got the ball in space, made a line break, got past 2 or 3, ducked under another 1 or 2, and that's a big reason for his 8 tackle breaks. But he just needs the ball in a little bit of space, and he can do the rest. So, yeah, hopefully Penrith get the ball back down the right a little bit more. But look, if you can bank a 45 from your winger without really doing anything, with a whole heap of attacking upside on top of that, yes, please. It probably just means more people are probably going to be less likely to play, and they're going to be more and more frustrated and look to someone else like a Lomax, like an Nawaka Nituazi, who's again been a victim of Sammy Walker. Mate, another victim of Sammy Walker is our man James Tedesco, the face of GDS. His scores over the last couple of rounds, there's no secret, but those down scores have coincided with Sammy Walker's return. Sammy Walker's been dominant on that left-hand side of the field, and while the Roosters probably have been looking a little bit better, and obviously he's their face of the future, it's sort of putting a dent in a bit of Tedesco's involvement close to the line as well, and certainly for Nawaka Nituazi on the right-hand side. Him and Rob Toyer are basically catching colds now. There's so much footy going down the left-hand side. Look, I'm still going to play James Tedesco, but I'm just not as excited as I probably would be. With scores of 32, 50 and 31 with Sam Walker in the team, look, it doesn't make for great reading, but we know that the Roosters are in must-win mode. That's when Teddy's at his best. He'll be running for 200 meters. He'll be breaking tackles, and it won't be long before things click. There was a reason why he was the number one fullback and the number one player across all GDS last season. Yeah, Sam Walker missed a bit of that season with the injury, but he also had plenty of big scores with Sam Walker in the side. So, yeah, it hasn't been smooth sailing for Tedesco players the last couple of rounds. Maybe somewhere where coaches might want to pot up. For me, I can't. I've got a bit of a better pod in the fullback position later on. So, let us know your thoughts on Teddy and who else you play in that position before I finish it up with a bit of a pod play.
Yeah, before we move on, we've got Benny Austin here jumping in with a bit of a chat around Shane Alford for a try assist. He has been pretty involved lately, so we might see him take the field and help Cleary out with a try assist or two. Good on you, Benny, for your comment. Also jumping back a little bit, Siv Kanga's going Karaz and To'o in his wing spot, so very similar to us. I think that just means that there's potential for maybe a salary pod or two there, potentially on Karaz, maybe over To'o. Probably a bit safer. You might want to play a higher rarity, maybe a silver or gold if you're in the contender comp, because a lot of other coaches will probably be playing that as well. And you might get that 7 to 10 extra points on top compared to other coaches that just play that bronze. So there's definitely options there. Yeah, look, Teddy, I'm going to go with Teddy as well. I'm a little bit concerned. Like you said, his 3-round average is around 37 GDS points, which isn't great reading. But they come up against the Dolphins. I've already talked about how big the matchup is. And anecdotally, I think this is where Teddy sort of stands up in these bigger games where there's something a little bit more on the line. Obviously, there's not necessarily stats to back that up. It's just a sort of a feeling thing. So for me, I'm going to go with Teddy. But if we need some stats to back that up as well, we go back to round 9. The Roosters played the Dolphins. James Tedesco put on an absolute clinic. 270 running meters, 10 tackle breaks, 4 offloads, 2 try assists, 2 line breaks, and 2 line break assists for a score of 92, which is his season's best. So if we can get more of that, even with Sammy Walker in the side, I will be cheering for Teddy. Then, my second option that I'm pretty happy with is Dylan Edwards up against the Knights. I've already touched on the Knights and sort of where they're heading and where I think they might be heading at the moment, and that's not very well. Obviously, Sharp, Ponga, and Lucas out for pretty much the season. And then the halves changed there as well with a couple of new faces or a new combo in the halves. I think I read somewhere they've had the most halves pairings this season of like 8 or 9, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I feel that obviously the Panthers will want to shut down that chat around and in the media around the trainer controversy, and then obviously that near loss to the Titans last week, and they'll want to come out and have a big score. And I think Edwards will be plenty involved in that. We know that he's sort of got his 50 plus in base and power, and then any attacking stats on top of that. And whether it's a ball out the back from Cleary or whether it's, a couple of line breaks himself, I think it'll just be cherry on the top. And again, he's probably going to be a salary pod for me as well. I'm going to put a little bit more salary on Dylan Edwards because I feel like probably he's the set and forget play out of the fullbacks this week, with a couple of options there where there might be a few differences. And one of those differences, a little bit nervous to play him, is Ryan Pappenhausen. The Broncos have allowed an average of 36 to fullbacks the last month, which isn't great. The last 2 games, we've seen Jai Gray and then Joash Papali'i score 42 and 46 respectively. No disrespect to them. They're not elite fullbacks yet in their careers and their journeys, but they were able to notch up 40 points against Broncos. It probably means that Pappenhausen should be scoring a little bit more. The positive for me is Pappy did kick goals for a few of those goals until he missed about 1,000 shots and was hooked and Meaney took over. But the positive was that he's fit enough to be able to kick goals coming off that injury earlier in the last couple of weeks. And then, he just goes back to doing those Pappenhausen things. And the big stat for me, and I know it's going back 4 years, but in 2021 when he scored 4 tries against the Broncos and absolutely ruined everyone's teams who didn't play Ryan Pappenhausen, and I just don't want to miss out on that. So, yeah, for me, it's Pappy. Hopefully he's kicking goals again. If there's any question mark over that and whether he's not going to kick goals, then he's probably going to find his way outside of my team.
Yeah, I've been really interested to know the percentage of players played and how many coaches are going to play a Ryan Pappenhausen. For me, no Pappy for me this week. I feel like there are a little bit maybe better options, and I want to see a bit more from him. And those kicking duties are obviously really vital, particularly in a team like the Melbourne Storm. Nick Meaney's not relevant playing at centre, but Ryan Pappenhausen isn't as relevant when he's not kicking goals. So if Meaney is kicking with Pappy playing fullback, it almost sort of kills both of those players. Whereas when Pappy was out, Meaney was a pretty good play as a centre that we could put into our centre position, playing fullback for the Storm. But when Pappy's back but not kicking, it certainly lessens the appeal slightly. Mate, I'm with you there on Dill Edwards. Think he's a great play, and he has been for the sort of post-origin period. He's getting back to his massive running meters, his tackle breaks, and he still hasn't really found the try line too frequently. So we've probably got some big scores just around the corner. It might not mean much, but he did score 120 without Isaiah Yeo. That match we spoke about against the Rabbitohs, Isaiah Yeo wasn't there. But he's only had one game without Yeo this season, so probably not too much to read into. But whether that means he's got to pick up a little bit more work without, someone like Isaiah Yeo playing through the middle, that still makes for interesting reading. So putting a bit of extra salary on a player like Dylan Edwards looks to be a pretty good option. Mate, for me, got a bit of a rogue one here. Not sure if it's as rogue as Skip. Skip's playing 3 centres this week and 2 fullbacks. We have spoken about the fullback position. Plenty of guys playing at fullback for their actual team, for their actual club team, but can be selected at centre for game day squad. So, yeah, I don't mind that. But here's my rogue shout for the week. It's keeping a fullback position open for Latrell Mitchell 2 o'clock p.m. on Sunday afternoon. Look, he's been named in jersey number 22 to return from that quad injury. South Sydney Rabbitohs are in deep contention for that wooden spoon with the Gold Coast Titans, who is their matchup on Sunday. And I have heard that Latrell Mitchell will face have a fitness test tomorrow. So we really should know, hopefully by tomorrow, if not Friday at the latest, whether or not he is going to take the field. If he isn't good to go and he's not going to play on the Sunday Arvo, then there's still plenty of time to swap in a fullback like we've got there on the board, or even someone like who else is still available there? KO Weeks. We probably won't be able to put a Pappy or a Walsh in if we don't get the news tomorrow. But if he doesn't get through the fitness test tomorrow, if there's still some doubts, it's probably an easy pivot. Even if he looks likely all the way up until Sunday 2 p.m, but doesn't make that team 1 hour from kickoff, there's still a couple of options, even in the next game with Drinkwater and even Zach Lomax in the outside backs as well. So someone like Latrell Mitchell in a do or die, he's been scoring plenty of fantasy points for fun all season long when fit. It wouldn't surprise me to see him having a big game on his return and being really low played across the GDS competitions. He did score a big 100-point score against the Titans last season in round 14 with just the one try. So he obviously likes to beat up on some of those teams a little bit lower down on the table. So we hate playing players coming back from injury, but there's just something telling me here that Latrell Mitchell, so maybe not in my challenger squad, which is the one that has my best prize card chance at the moment. But I think Latrell will find his way into 2 or 3 of my teams if we get some good news over the next couple of days, and it wouldn't surprise me to see a big show from him.
And it looks like Sif Kang has followed you, mate. He's also going Edwards and Mitchell. So maybe it's not a huge pod play. Maybe it's not as cheeky as it seems. Sif Kanger is generally doing quite well. So good on you, mate, for picking Mitchell. Oh, Cal's joined us. G'day, Cal. Thanks for joining us. I was just listening to the Red Zone theme song and it ended in this video, started playing. What a combo. Correct, mate. Absolute combo. We are less than, a month away from NFL starting. We cannot wait. Obviously, there is an unofficial GDS NFL draft as well. Jump over onto Discord if you are keen to get involved with that. We had a lot of fun last season with that, and hopefully we can have another big one this season. Back to fullbacks. The last potential option I want to throw out there, and I've thrown his name out before, and everyone's going to laugh at me, and that's okay. I'm going to play him in my challenger side, and that is Will Kennedy up against the Dragons. Again, Will Kennedy's ceiling's probably around 60 points. We haven't seen too much more from him. But the thing is that Dragons have allowed 57 in the last month of footy to fullbacks, which is the third best to fullbacks in the last month. So I'm keen to just have a crack and just throw something again. Like I said before, throw something against the wall and see if it sticks. Will Kennedy for me is that something. And hopefully he has a big game for the Sharkies. I think the Sharks should have a big game against the Dragons. Obviously, the Dragons played quite tough last week against the Raiders, but there's a whole lot of changes there as well. And I think that the Sharkies probably might tear them apart. And then outside of that, you've got Weeks up there. they're up against Manly. Manly have allowed 52 in the last month, which is a little bit more than what they've allowed this season. So I think he's definitely an option. And the last one that we haven't named there and we haven't really talked about is Reece Walsh. Obviously, we touched on he came off that game last week with 56 points. He was on 19 with barely any time to go. Is there any thoughts around playing Reece Walsh up against the Storm, who are allowing a decent amount of points to fullbacks?
Short answer, no. Look, I was expecting everything to go well for Reece Walsh last week, him to score 100 plus or, break records against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. If you weren't watching the game and only saw the final score with the Bronx putting on 60, you would have gone, here we go. What did Reece Walsh score me for my fantasy team? And then when you read 50, what was it, 54, 56, you would have probably felt a little bit disappointed. Now, if you were someone watching that game very closely with a Reece Walsh price card or a Reece Walsh diamond across a couple of teams, like myself, you would have been pretty disappointed for about 61 minutes of that match when he was still below 20 points. He only really turned it on at the end when the Bronx put on three or four tries back to back really late, and he was a big part of that. But yeah, look, his score was not looking pretty against the one team that all fullbacks can score on. Look, it was looking unlikely that he was even going to beat Will Kennedy's 51. And I think he only got past there on the last set of the match, or the second last set of the match where he scored his try. But not for me against the Melbourne Storm. The numbers that you rattled off did speak favourably for fullbacks against them, and on his day, Reece Walsh, can be absolutely electric, can score 2 or 3 tries or have his hand in a couple as well. But mate, not after last week, sitting through 61 minutes of nothing. His base was still super, super low as well. So he only really got out of jail with a big score because of all of that attack toward the end of the game. If he was chipping away with plenty of runs and tackle breaks and offloads throughout the game and was sort of, sitting on the high 30s, low 40s before all of that attack came, I probably wouldn't be too worried. But yeah, that really low score outside of the attack against someone like the Melbourne Storm, not for me this week. But look, that's where you can make up some ground on the leaderboard. So anyone playing Reece Walsh this weekend, good luck to you. Dill, I would like a screenshot from you at 3 p.m. on Saturday with the lock symbol in front of Will Kennedy in your fullback position for your challenger team.
Definitely. And anyone else that is watching that is going to follow and play Will Kennedy, if you can screenshot that, I will give you a 3-player common pack as well for following me along. That's what I do for people that are supporting us. Alrighty, let's jump in and have a look at our classic sides. Again, we've talked about a few salary pods and where our salary might lie, and we've only really got a couple of differences there. We can see Matt Tomiko up against Dane Gagai. We've also got Smith up against Jolliffe, and then Pappy against that Mitchell Shout, although that's probably got an asterisk next to it just in case Mitchell isn't named or he's ruled out tomorrow based on the fitness test. So there are some options there as well in terms of wingers, centres that you could bring in, or even another fullback. So that's what our squads look like at the moment. We always premise that with there could be changes, and there usually are come an hour before kickoff due to various things that happen both on and off the field, weather permitting as well. So keep an eye on team lists. I try and do my best to name the squads an hour before kickoff over on the Discord of GameDay Squad. So just search up GameDay Squad Discord over on Google and you can check it out. Alrighty, Stewie jumped ahead a little bit there, but you can see finally a clean sweep. It took 1 week of a couple of massive calls and finally the clean sweep occurred. I think it's only the second this season, although I'm out of the Bro Down Showdown. It's nice to see 3 ticks with my name on them. That means that anyone that nominated me to win, you've now got yourself into the draw for the 3 for a couple of cards. I think I might give away all 3 this time. What do you reckon?
Yeah, sounds good to me. There's quite a few people in this, isn't there?
Yeah, including yourself. And I've named you No Confidence Due because you actually nominated yourself. And for good reason, I guess, 3-0.
I was just looking at your 3 options. They're incredible.
All those names that commented, Dill, congratulations. Good luck. Here we go. We're spinning for a 3-player rare pack. And it is friend of the show, Jack Ganners, an AFL No, but also enjoying some of the rugby league. Good on you, Ganners. Alrighty, Stu, do you want to do the honours of opening the pack?
Yes, I have pre-opened one. You should be able to see it on screen now. Is that right?
That is perfect. Let's go.
All right, so what are we saying? Gunners is getting all three?
Yep, go on. Give them all
Beauty.
three.
Let's go. Got a gold,
Whee.
Clint Gutherson. Oh, a plat,
Whoa.
Alex Johnston.
Probably the wrong
And
really.
bit of a Rabbitohs theme there with Munro. Probably a bit of a name for the future there. Gee, Alex Johnson, if Latrell Mitchell does get named, there's every chance that he just gets absolutely fed on that left wing to try to run down that top try scorer tally before the end of the season, not far from that. All right, so Gunners, hit me up, mate. Congratulations, well done. Those cards are yours, and I might flick you another one for free as well. I think we agreed last week that was worth double points if you can clean sweep. Is that right, Dill? You need just about double points every single week to.
Yeah. I'm still in the game. Come on, let's go.
Yeah. All right, so Dill needs to sweep every single week moving forward. We spun the wheel. We are deciding between our hooker, middle, and centre. Here is what the Brodown Showdown looks like for round 23. Dill, although his name's not there on the left-hand side, you know the trick by now. If you want, if you think Dill and his selections of Damien Cook, Payne Haas, and Matt Timokol will outscore my Brayley, Connor Watson, and AJ Brimson as a head-to-head, it could be 2-1 or 3-0. Comment Dill's name if you think those three will get up once again, or if you think I will get back into the winner's circle with Brayley, Watson, and AJ Brimson. Make sure you comment Stu in the chat. We had 2 people call a clean sweep last week.
Oh, did we?
I think I was one of them. So show yourself, whoever the other one was. We got Jay Boney. I don't know if he just makes a really good entrance every week and comments right at the right time, or if he's just lurking there in the shadows and getting a little bit of work done and listening to our tips, but then comments for Brodown Showdown. So Jay Boney, we got Sif Kanga, Skip, Rainsy, all tipping Stu this week. Cossie was on Dill 3-0 last week.
There you go. Good on you,
Cossie. Ryan P has gone off Stu. I think he tipped me last week, and he wants to get back in the winner's circle with Dill.
I love it.
Mate, quite a bit of difference this one. There's not as many Dills this week, so it looks like I am in with a chance, and you would have noticed that I haven't voted for this week. There we go. Melissa is going with Stu, having carefully read both options. All right.
Mate, that is it.
That's it for another live show for round 23 is insane. Next week, round 24, I think it might be a public holiday up here in southeast Queensland, but you and I will be on the tills, I'm sure, Dill. We'll be back joining everyone next Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. despite the public holiday to preview round 24. And hopefully we can talk about how some of our calls during tonight's episode was able to come off and how you and I featured in the leaderboards once again across those 4 competitions. Thanks for joining us once again, everyone. Thanks for sharing your comments, letting us know who you're starting, and for voting in the Brodown Showdown. Good luck to those 4 still in the Classic Cup. Hopefully we can get 1 or 2 of you on the stream over the next couple of weeks in the lead up to that grand final. But for everyone else, thanks for joining us. Good luck for round 23. And make sure you go follow the Fantasy Bros over on Instagram. Give us a subscribe on YouTube, and come join us in the fun on Discord. Good luck this week. Catch you next week.